Hello guys, today I'm going to be discussing why I think a M1 Mac Mini is a better choice for 90% of people out there than the new M2 Mac Minis that have just been announced pretty much in the last couple of weeks. This video is going to be quite a long one, so strap in as there's going to be a lot of details about the two machines and why I think that the M1 is probably the better choice for the common average user. So, going back in time, my journey with the Mac has been a bit of a rocky one. I was a Mac user since birth, pretty much, from the Power Mac G4, which I've actually got sat behind me, all the way up to pretty much a 2013 MacBook Pro Retina, and in 2015 and 2016, when the new MacBook Pros came out, I decided to switch to Windows, and my experience with Windows was alright, to be honest. I was quite a good PC gamer. Enjoyed it quite a bit, but something was just missing, and which I got from macOS. So, having seen Apple sort of fall down a path of not caring too much about their Macs and more focusing on their iDevices, I gave up, and it's changed now with the new Apple Silicon machines, and I've decided to give the M1 Mac Mini a go, and did a lot of research going into this because I did purchase it while the M2 was out, and for only pretty much £100 more I could have got the new machine, but I decided to save my money and get the older machine due to some of the things I'm going to discuss today. I just want to preface this by saying, if you're thinking about Apple Silicon but not 100% sure because it's a new technology, 100% go for it. It is absolutely immense how powerful it is, how energy efficient it is. It's incredible. So the first thing I want to touch on is the whole 8GB of RAM debate that a lot of people are having. Apple's still shipping the M2, MacBook Pro, MacBook Air and Mac Mini in the 8GB RAM base configuration. So I've got 8GB of RAM in my Mac Mini, and I do push it harder than most people, and it's doing quite well. Looking at Activity Monitor and looking at the swap, it's not too bad. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. Now, if anyone doesn't know what swap is what macOS or Windows, they call it a page file, but what macOS uses as temporary RAM based on your solid state drive. There's two disadvantages with using swap. One is that the SSD is a lot slower than RAM. Obviously, modern SSDs are blazing fast, so the difference is sort of negligible. You won't really notice it. But the second reason is it can wear out your SSD faster if you do use a lot of swap. So my recommendation there is, if you are using apps like Final Cut Pro, Photoshop, those really heavy workload apps, they will run brilliantly on the M1. But do go for 16GB of RAM and possibly higher SSD storage as well if you're really pushing it. I would just like to mention, early reports of Apple Silicon machines with high SSD usage have been fixed. It was a bug in macOS Big Sur, and we're on Ventura now. Obviously, high swap will cause more terabytes written to your SSD and a shorter lifespan, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was. So don't be discouraged from getting an Apple Silicon machine due to a bug. It's not there anymore. Now, in terms of the SSDs, my Mac Mini has the base model 256GB SSD. Now, I get read-write speeds of about 3000, and unfortunately, with the new Mac Mini, you don't anymore. Apple have changed the NAND flash packages on their logic boards to one single flash, whereas the old model had two 128GB flashes, and basically what that's done is it's half the speed on the new Mac Minis, the new MacBook Pros, the new MacBook Airs. Now, for, again, about 60% of people who just browse Facebook, you're going to be fine with it. But for people who do open just any sort of apps, you will notice it going along, and my argument is, why pay more for pretty much less performance in that aspect? Now, the M1 versus the M2 chip in terms of performance is not that much different. Apart from the 2 extra GPU cores and the dedicated ProRes video hardware encoder chips built into the M2 Silicon, the difference is not that much. So, according to Mac Tracker, which uses Geekbench 5 as their performance figures, the M1 multi-core scores 7,413. Now, I've seen mine go up to 7,500, 7,600 if nothing's open on my own machine. and the M2 gets 8,700, so it's basically 1,000 points more for the M2, and you'll be paying a lot more for that new machine. In terms of single core performance, the M1 scores 1711 versus the M2 scores 19. So there is quite a difference there, but again, it's not so drastic to be spending the added money. And again, for 90% of people, even doing heavy workflows, they won't really notice it. Now, talking about performance, I came from my high-end PC, Ryzen 12 core 3950X and a RTX 3070, and this little machine has shocked me. Now, I do play a few games on my Mac, notably Dolphin Emulator, which is an emulator for GameCube and Wii games. Now, of course, on the PC it ran perfectly, and I thought I was going to have a lot of issues, a lot of stuttering, you know, a lot of frame drops on the M1 Mac. No, it's absolutely insane how they've got this much performance out of a tiny package. I easily get solid 60 frames per second at 3 times upscaling playing Mario Kart Wii, and GameCube games I can do 4 times upscaling Luigi's Mansion, and it works perfectly. Now, I'm running a 4K monitor on my Mac Mini, and it looks absolutely phenomenal, even with only 3 times upscaling. It is shockingly good. Now, other games like CSGO or City Skylines, they ain't optimised for the M1 Silicon yet, so they're running under a translation layer called Rosetta. And Rosetta basically translates Apple's Intel software to Apple Silicon. Now, it does take a degrade on performance. So CSGO, I do get a solid 60, sometimes higher, but there is slight stuttering and frame drops during that gameplay. City Skylines runs okay. It's usually about 40 to 50 FPS at a heavy city that you've created. Again, not the performance of a gaming PC, but still pretty impressive for a machine the size of, well, a book, maybe even smaller. Now, in terms of expansion, the M1 and M2 Mac Mini base models, unless you get the M2 Pro, which is a different story altogether, the M1 and the M2 base models have 2 Thunderbolt 3/USB-C, USB 4 ports, 2 USB 3.1 Gen 2 ports, 1 headphone microphone input/output, power input, and gigabit Ethernet or 10 gigabit Ethernet if you spec it that way. No SD card slot is included on the M1 or M2 Mac Mini. Now, I've got around that by using a hub, and it is this one here, and it's created by Elkif. Now, I'm going to be doing a video review on this because I think it's absolutely amazing. It gives you extra storage, it gives you 3 more USB ports, 1 more USB-C port, micro SD and SD expansion. It's a must for a Mac, honestly is. Now, in terms of price, you can get a M1 Mac Mini for around £450 to £500 on Facebook Marketplace or eBay at the moment, now that the new ones are out, whereas the new ones start at £600. Now, 16GB of RAM is £800 for the M2, and the M1 you could probably find for about £600 to £700. So again, it's about £100 to £200 if you're a smart shopper off getting the older machine for not much performance loss, to be honest. Now, I think the M1 Mac Mini is a fantastic choice for people starting out on the Macintosh. I think it's a fantastic choice for people who are migrating from a Windows machine and want to try a Mac. It's a great entry to show you what macOS is like and to build you into that Apple ecosystem. The issue is once you get in, you can't get out. But it's a good machine all in all. Well, that's been this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be publishing the video on the dock very soon. So I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you very much.